I am Lily Cass, Opera Philadelphia's Scholar in Residence, and it is my pleasure today to introduce you to Margaret Bond's 1965 choral work, Credo. In this video, I will share some biographical information about the composer, context for the piece's unique text, and reflections on the music. Margaret Bonds was born in Chicago in 1913. Her mother, Estella C. Bonds, was an organist for a Baptist church, and Margaret studied piano with her mother from an early age. Margaret Bonds was something of a child prodigy, and at the age of 5, she wrote her very first composition. Her mother was friends with many of the best musicians in Chicago, and Bonds met other composers and performers from around the country when they came to Chicago to perform. In fact, when the great composer Florence Price and her family moved to Chicago to take a break from the relentless racism they were enduring in their hometown of Little Rock, Arkansas, they stayed with the Bonds family, and Margaret Bonds was able to take private music lessons with Florence Price. Bonds stayed embedded in the Chicago musical community as she entered her college years, commuting daily on the train to Evanston, Illinois, to attend Northwestern University's School of Music. Although she worked hard and earned her diploma, as a Black student, she was not able to stay in the dorms or use the school's recreational facilities. Margaret Bonds was a prolific composer, able to write popular music, spirituals, classical symphonies, and everything in between. She was also an accomplished concert pianist, performing her own works and those of others. In fact, the music she wrote for piano is fiendishly difficult to play, and pianists often complain that Bonds wrote the pieces with her own skill set in mind. Perhaps most importantly, Margaret Bonds was a teacher and community leader wherever she went. The text that Bonds set in the piece that would prove to be her final choral work was by W.E.B. Du Bois. Du Bois, a civil rights activist, is perhaps most famous for his series of sociological essays on race entitled The Souls of Black Folk, which he published in 1903. Credo, a much shorter text, was published 1 year later. Du Bois fashioned his credo on the model of the Nicene Creed, a list of Christian beliefs that makes up the third of 5 typical sections of a Mass ordinary. Like in the Nicene Creed, Du Bois proclaims his belief in God and Jesus, whom he refers to as the Prince of Peace. But instead of going into the particulars of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, like in the original text, he connects his religious beliefs to belief in people themselves. Credo means I believe, and W.E.B. Du Bois's Credo lists 9 main ideas that Du Bois believes in. First is God. Second, the Negro race. Third, pride of race and lineage. Fourth, service. 5, the devil. 6, the Prince of Peace. 7, liberty for all men. 8, the training of children. And 9, patience. Since Margaret Bonds set this powerful text as a choral work for solo voices, there is power in numbers. The solo voices, a soprano and a baritone, remind us that the group is made up of individuals, but the greatest emphasis is on the community at large. Credo's music follows the contours of its text, emphasizing its contrasts as it discusses utopian visions of free men, quote, enjoying the sunshine, quote, uncursed by color, end quote, even while acknowledging that war is usually, and I quote again, the wicked conquest of darker nations by nations whiter and stronger. There are beautiful flowing sections with consonant harmonies. There's even a quotation from the Christmas carol, Hark the Herald Angels Sing. But there are also rhythmically driven portions with crashing chords, recognizing the cruel reality that world peace and equality for all are incredibly difficult goals to reach. Margaret Bonds' Credo has been seldom performed since its premiere, in part because the score was not published until 2020. It is sadly the case that many works by Bonds and other female and Black composers have been unfairly neglected over the years. We hope that our performance at the Academy of Music this winter is only the very beginning of Credo's well-deserved revival. Especially